How about that? Today is the 27th. Well, everything's a little bit slower than normal, but we're here. Anybody home? Good morning, Shavia. Hi, Brittany. Let's see here. Hey, April. Shavia. Good morning, Adam. Anna. Adam. Sorry about that, Anna. And Katie. Glad you guys are all, I assume you're healthy. Macy. Morning, Eugene. Let's see, Katie is here. Katie, where are you, Katie? There you are. Hi, Deja. Did you guys have a good week last week? Natalie. Good morning, Natalie. Oh, wow. Well, you got a lot going on in your life, Eugene. Well, that's a lot of fun to do that, especially if it's with one that you can uh, join up with forever and grow in each other. Hope it'll work out nicely for you. Well, let's see. We are missing Caitlin. Let's see. Caitlin's not there. And let's see. Anna's here. And we are missing, let's see. Destiny is not here. Jacqueline and Amanda. Okay. Did all of you get a Word document that dealt with chapter 22, 23, and 24? Okay. I think I sent that out through your email as a Word document. Good. Okay, that's good. Have you looked them over? Studied them a little bit for Wednesday's test? So when I know I talked with you about 22, and did I finish 23 with you guys? Did I actually get to lecture a little bit to you or talk to you about 23, chapter 23, the cardiovascular problems, and along with Lyme disease and Rocky Mountain spotted fever, bubonic plague? Did I get to talk to you about that? Hi, Amanda. Glad you could get on. Okay, so if I didn't get to talk with you about chapter 23, okay, Daisha, looks like we're getting a majority are all thinking the same thing. So let's look on in your textbook on page 735. Here we go. Dining room tables made for a plate, not for a computer and a book and all sorts of things like that. It gets crowded over here. But anyway, on page 735, as you look in the second column, if we have not talked about septicemias. And of course, septicemia means, in some cases, it means you got a toxin in your bloodstream. They might say toxemia. A lot of times they say septicemia, but a lot of times when they say septicemia, they mean that you have you have bacteria that are multiplying in your bloodstream. That's a deadly situation. You don't play with that. You go get yourself a doctor and get some IV antibiotics to knock that out. Now, as you look in the second column, I want you to start there in the middle, come down where you see the word septicemias, and you see the first sentence there, before antibiotics, septicemias were often fatal. Come on down about 6 lines. 6 lines in that column on page 735, and you see says, however, other bacterial species, used to be a bunch of gram-positives that did this, but now we've got Pseudomonas. Don't worry about Bacteroides, but Klebsiella, Proteus, Enterobacter, and Serratia. Those are all gram-negative rods. Now, what do you know about gram-negative rods that can throw a person into shock, into septicemia? Now, you can get them growing in your bloodstream, but how do they produce the shock? When you think of shock, go back to your anatomy and physiology, you think of the blood vessels, and they open up, blood pressure plummets. LPS, that's right. Somebody put some other letters in there. He's got the right idea. Eugene's got the right idea. Good. Hey, oh, you're pretty quick with your fingers there, Eugene. That's good. Some people will call it the endotoxin. Don't have to apologize for that. Probably the transmission's slow anyway. So that's a big danger about taking IV antibiotics. Remember, we talked about that back in chapter, I want to say it was around 4, where we talked about the outer membrane. That's where this comes from. So you want to remember that. And you come on down into the second paragraph and you see that bold print term lymphangitis. And obviously with an ITIS, you either have inflammation or you have an infection. And it's an infection of the lymph vessels. Now, if you look on the next page, and I don't know if you have a colored version of the textbook, you could probably Google it, pictures of lymphangitis. If you look at that person's arm, maybe in the black and white, you can see the streaks just under the skin. That's what happened with my, let's see, which one was it? It was a thumb. Yeah, I think it was under a thumb. And remember I told you I would cut a little piece of tissue away that was growing, and it got infected, and I saw the line coming up my thumb and got to my wrist. And when it got to my wrist, I got to get to the doctor, got some lymphangitis going. That can turn into septicemia. Now, you do have lymph nodes up in your armpit, your axilla. and those might take care of the problem, but you don't want to rest on that. You want to go to the doctor and get yourself some antibiotics and knock that out, because you could die from that. So keep that in mind. Wonder where my cup of coffee went for this morning. Still on 736, page 736, same column, come down to puerperal fever. Puerperal fever. Puerperum is the time frame after birth of a child. And so when they say you have puerperal fever, it's an infection of the uterus after having delivered a child. And if you look in that little section under puerperal fever, you'll see in the third, fourth line down, the organism that typically causes it is a group A beta hemolytic streptococcus. Now you can picture in your mind, we had enough lab there to let you look at some beta hemolytic streptococcus, and it's the same organism that causes a strep throat. So ladies can carry that in the reproductive tract. Doesn't bother them at all. Doesn't even bother the newborn that comes out. It's the group B that we're going to mention in just a second that can bother the newborn. But anyway, serious situation there. We don't, at least I don't know any incidences after teaching this for a number of years of where ladies have had puerperal fever. They may put them on an antibiotic after the delivery of the child, and that prevents that sort of problem, sort of a preventive measure. Any question on puerperal fever? Then let's go down to the next one, which is group B streptococcal disease. And you see it says group B streptococci, Streptococcus agalactiae. Streptococcus agalactiae and Streptococcus pyogenes will look the same under the microscope, and they're both beta hemolytic. Now notice, when you hear group A and group B, what's the difference between those two organisms? At least here at this moment. There are other things, but just from looking at the name, how are they different? How would we identify them? Antigens in the cell wall. That's exactly right. Antigens in the cell wall. And so now I'm assuming it's probably a standard procedure, but they will take a swab, maybe on the cervix, just right on the vaginal wall, and they will test it to see if they come up with group B streptococcus. That organism likes to attack the newborn as it passes through the birth canal. So if a lady is group B positive, then when she comes in to deliver, they will give her an antibiotic. They'll have an IV going, and they'll just push an antibiotic into her bloodstream through the IV, and that antibiotic can pass through the placenta into the bloodstream of the newborn, and it has reduced what used to be about 12 to 15,000 newborns dying each year, and they didn't have any idea what was causing it till they found out about group B. Can identify with the MAB. I'm not sure what MA means, but anyway, you're right. They have to do that. That's what's different about these two organisms. It's kind of interesting. The group A doesn't create a problem for the newborn, but group B can do that. So that's how we prevent it now. And now we've got 12,000, 15,000 kids that maybe would have died, and they have not died from this organism. Everybody feel comfortable with that? Well, they would use monoclonal antibodies. That's correct. I thought about that, but I thought maybe you had something else. It was MAB, because sometimes we have some little acronyms that are the same thing. But they look for that antigen, and they'll use a monoclonal antibody to identify that. So you have a color change, and they'll know that you're positive or you're negative. Everybody comfortable with that? Anybody uncomfortable with that? Now, as you look on that same page, you look at page 736, and you see in the second column rheumatic fever. Now, we have talked about rheumatic fever back in chapter 18. And so what I want you to do is read the next 3 pages, and I want you to read them in terms of contrasting rheumatic fever versus bacterial endocarditis. They can be similar in some respects, but what I want you to do is contrast them. How are they different from each other? How is rheumatic fever, which deals with the heart, the endocardium, how is it different from bacterial endocarditis? Still, you have the endocardium being attacked, but read those. It's basically just 2 columns almost, 2 columns, a little bit more than that. But how are they similar? How are they different? I've already mentioned how they're similar, at least in one way, is that the endocardium is being attacked. But how are they different? Why are they called different names? So make sure you read that so that you know, can you treat one with an antibiotic? Can you treat and the other one can't be, or whatever? Okay? Everybody got that assignment? Okay. I'm assuming you're hearing me and everything's all right. Let's go over to page 740. Page 740, and after you get through, I guess you'd say, closing your mouth, and as you look at that picture down at the bottom, you see that poor fellow there? He's got a condition that we don't usually see, at least caused by the organism that typically creates this problem for someone. That guy lives on an island in the South Pacific. Sometimes they present those islands as paradise. I would not think this guy is in paradise in the sense of his physical health. But look at the second column, and you see the term bacterial systemic diseases, and the first one is anthrax. Page 740, and second column, and you see anthrax, and you see it's a zoonosis. Brittany, what does zoonosis mean? Brittany, you still there? What does zoonosis mean? April, can you tell me what zoonosis means? I was back in chapter, I want to say 15. Okay, well, look it up. Let's look over on page 741. Let's see, Brittany, you got a disease and Annie could carry. Ah, okay, good job. Okay. Okay, animal, that's right. So you look on page 741 and you see in the first column, come down to where you see the disease. And the reason we mention this is because this was a problem back when we had 9/11, and you had people shipping through the mail. That's right, and it transfers it to a person, Brittany. Uh, that's how we pick it up, usually coming in contact with um, the animal, and the animal has the disease, has the organism in it, and may be sick with it, and then it transfers it to us. So that's a zoonosis, a disease transmitted to us by an animal. So as you look at the bottom of the first column, you see the disease, and it says the causative agent is Bacillus anthracis. So you want to highlight that, gram-positive, endospore producing rod, facultatively anaerobic. So you can highlight those first 4 lines. Come over to the second column and look in the second paragraph, and you see human anthrax cases appear in 3 different ways. Now, I want you to know the cutaneous is the one that most of the time people get, but you can pick it up in the respiratory tract as well as the GI tract. And of course, it was respiratory anthrax that was showing up, and the doctors had never seen it. But it's actually present in America. Some of you may have never heard of anthrax. We sort of grew up knowing it because our heroes were not what the heroes are today. Our heroes were cowboys, and they were always driving cattle to the railhead over in Kansas to get the meat back to New York and other places, so the cities like Chicago, and they were concerned about anthrax. They could pick anthrax up by ingesting the spores in the GI tract of the cattle, and then the cattle could come down with this disease. As a matter of fact, if you will look on page 743, and you see the bottom half of the page says public health. It's going to show you how close we walk on a line to keep the food source healthy. Just read that, and we live by faith that somebody's doing what he's supposed to be doing, and when we don't do what we're supposed to be doing, that creates problems for us. So let you know, how close we are sometimes to having a problem. Everybody okay with anthrax? That's all I want you to know about anthrax. Okay, let's look on page 744. And you see in the second column, 744, you see the word plague. And by that word plague, I want you to write the word bubonic. B-U-B-O-N-I-C. Bubonic. And you notice it says it's a zoonosis. We'll see how that plays out in just a second. If you will look on 745, look at the first column and look at the first two lines, three lines actually. And you see it says the disease is the disease is referred to as sylvatic plague. You don't have to know that term for me, but keep reading. It says because it's carried by wild rodents such as ground squirrels, chipmunks, and desert rats. And you guys got any little chipmunks around your house? You live close enough to the woods where you've got some little chipmunks that come up in the yard or whatever once in a while? Cute little fellas. We used to have them where we lived in Georgia. You walk out the back door and you walk about 10, 15 yards and you were in the woods. And it was woods, plenty of them, a lot of oaks and maples and things like that. Great place for wildlife. That's probably where I got an enjoyment out of nature there. Some of you maybe chipmunk means to you, what is it, Chippendale? They're cute little fellows, but they can carry some things. I don't know that we carry it a whole lot around here. If you look at the map on page 744, you see it says countries. Down at the bottom, you see the kind of light brown says countries reporting plague, and then probable sylvatic is out west. We don't seem to, I've never heard of a case out here, like in Florence County, for instance, or Darlington, where we go deer hunting. But out in the west, they have what they call sylvatic plague, which is still gotten from these little fellas. One thing that you need to remember about this is come back over to page 745. You don't have to know that map, but some of you may end up wandering out there in that part of the country. There's these things where nurses can sign on, and they'll go spend 2 years in Texas or a year in Texas. Then they'll go to Nevada and spend a year, and they'll go to Montana and so forth. It's kind of a neat way, if you're not married, to have a job and you work for a couple of years. You get experience under your belt and you get to see the country too. There's a lot of beautiful country in America to see. But I want you to look on the first column again on page 745. Come down to where you see the disease. And you see it says the causative agent is Yersinia pestis. Comes from like a word pestilence. Okay. Short gram-negative rod. Now I want you to come down 14 lines from the disease 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Yeah, I think it's 14 lines down. And you see it says humans by flea bites. So the flea transfers the Yersinia pestis to a person. Now, we don't have that problem around here. You probably have had pets and you've had to take care of them in the sense of keeping the fleas off of them, because if they come in the house or whatever, they can be a problem in the carpet, can't they? But we just don't see this disease. We have fleas, but we don't see that they carry this. Hang on just a minute. I heard a noise. Let me make sure that my wife is okay. Be right back. Okay, wasn't my wife. Let's see, where were we? If you go out west, you can come in contact with some fleas that can carry this. One little girl was with her parents. They were camping in, I want to say, Wyoming. She came upon a dead squirrel. And so she wanted to bury it. So she dug a little grave for it. Well, there was some fleas on it. And here she comes with a nice warm body. They jump on her, get inside her sweatshirt and bite her, and she develops bubonic plague. You can die from bubonic plague. So we don't have the problem. We're thankful for that. But if you go out west, you got to keep in mind that's a possibility out there. Now, I want you to look at top of page 745. And you see the first couple of sentences says to a human victim who has a 50 to 60% chance of dying if you don't get treated. So, got to be careful. Come into the next paragraph. It says, once inside the host, the bacilli multiply, travel in the lymphatics to lymph nodes where they cause hemorrhages and immense lymph node enlargements called buboes. Now, we're not talking about boo-boos. You know how somebody says, Johnny's got a boo-boo, and that's some new language that says, you know, he's got a bruise or a cut or something like that. But anyway, here's where we get the term bubonic plague. Now, what I want you to do, just to get an idea of what a bubo looks like, is to go to page 638. Go to page 638 in your textbook. As you look on page 638, you see this guy holding his penis. Look at the lesion to the right, it's actually his left inguinal region. Might be a little hard to see a difference there, but that's a bubo. Now, you and I have had the doctor feel under our necks, especially when we go for a physical, or if you go because you've got some respiratory infection or whatever. So that's a bubo. Now, when they say immense, they mean immense. They mean big. Now, go back a couple of pages to 636. Page 636, and you look at this guy's left inguinal region. Yeah, after you get your eye off his penis, it looks like somebody took a chunk out of it. Some people let things go for a long time, then they finally get to a doctor. But anyway, that guy's got a bubo. Now, if you had the color version of this, and you could look it up, you can do some pictures, on the internet. They'll show you these things. But those buboes can get so big they burst through the skin, and here comes blood and pus. On the colored version, and you may be able to make it out on the black and white version, there's a film on the inside of his thigh. Well, that's pus left over from the eruption. But that's a bubo. So you and I probably have never had a bubo, certainly not up here. Where we usually see them is in the inguinal region, because if you've had dogs and cats and you've had to battle the flea, then they get on your legs and your ankles and they bite you there. So if they bite you in those lower legs and those ankles, then the bacteria enters down there and then it travels through the lymphatics to the inguinal lymph nodes. And of course, they become buboes. They swell up and can break through the skin, pus comes out and so forth. So that's why they call it bubonic plague. They also call it Black Death. If you'll go back to 735, go back to 735, and in that same second column, if you come down under plague, see the bold print term plague? It says hemorrhages turn the skin black, hence the name Black Death. And that's the plague that took out about 25% of the population of Europe back in the 1500s, I believe it was. Now, before we leave bubonic plague, and you can cure it. You don't have to have some exotic antibiotic. You can take tetracycline or doxycycline or something like that, and you can beat it. But you don't want to wait until it's too late. 50 to 60% death rate. Now, I want you to look at the public health box on 745. Take a minute to read that, please. So here we have a person who is capturing, can we say, cute little creatures that are wild, but they have these fleas. And unbeknownst to him, a couple of them got on him. Next thing you know, he's dead. But think about that if he sells those in a town. And a number of people think, oh, they're real cute, I want to take care of that little fella. You can see how close we can be to a big problem. Now, let's leave bubonic plague unless you have a question about it. Let's look over on page 747. Page 747, look down at the bottom of the first column and you see brucellosis. And you see again in the second line, I call it also undulant fever, which means it goes up and down, up and down. Second line says it's a zoonosis caused by the species of Brucella, Brucella being the genus, little gram-negative rod. And if you look in the second column, you see it says second paragraph, second column, second paragraph on 747. Brucella enters host through the digestive tract through contaminated dairy products and animal feed, but you're not going to be eating animal feed, or if we start eating that, we got some big problems in America. But anyway, it's usually poorly pasteurized products. Pasteurization, if it's done right, will kill this organism, and it's safe. That's why we have pasteurized milk. I also want you to know that, and I think it's a law, people who own dairy herds are supposed to vaccinate their cattle. So we actually have two levels of protection against brucellosis. Now, if we don't follow the instructions, then people can have a problem. There was a vet here in town who did big animals and large animals, and he got called to a dairy herd one time where a cow was calving, and the calf was turned around inside the uterus, and so he had to go up in the vagina and in the uterus, and the little calf's foot, as it tried to move around in the uterus, slit his arm, and it slit the glove, and the juices from from the cow's uterus got into his bloodstream, and he developed endocarditis and almost died from it because the farmer did not vaccinate his herd. We live by faith that people are doing what is right, and if they don't, it can be a problem for other people. Any questions about brucellosis? Okay, if we have no questions on brucellosis, let's look at the bottom of the second column on 748. Second column, page 748, and down at the bottom. You see we're looking at Lyme disease. You have heard of it. Doctors used to say we didn't have it down here, but we do have it down here. I want you to look on 749, the second column. And you look in the second paragraph, and you will see, third line into the second paragraph, the causative agent, Borrelia burgdorferi, unknown spirochete, previously unknown spirochete. Spirochete is another word for a type of spiral bacterium. You can just call it a spiral bacterium. And you see that's the organism that causes Lyme disease. Now, you know probably that the way we pick that up is through a tick, isn't it? And we got plenty of ticks. Doctors used to say we don't have that tick down here. And I watched one of our colleagues out there in the science department bring in ticks from off Second Loop Road as you go down to Jeffries Creek. And here were these little ticks. So it's present, but most of the time we're not out in the woods, but that's a good reason when you come out of the woods, check yourself over, all those spots that they like to get to where it's warm, you know. So anyway, you see in the next couple of next lines down, it says on the East Coast, it's carried by Ixodes. Now, I'm not going to get you to do the species, but Ixodes is the genus. And you see it's called a black-legged tick, feeds on deer and mice, and sometimes they call it a deer tick. If you've ever had the opportunity to go hunting, or maybe were involved in skinning a deer, when you hang it up and you're going to take the skin off of it, I put on yellow gloves and I spray them with repellent, and the ticks just come rolling off. They're all over that yellow glove, and then they fall down, and they don't want to have anything to do with me because they got this insect repellent on. But those deer can carry a lot of ticks. So on page 750, you see in the first column it says diagnosis, treatment, and prevention. Now I want you to read, not right now, just make a note to read. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. About 13 lines in there. The first presentation of Lyme disease is something like the flu. Something like the flu. Now, we know when the flu season is, don't we? Usually something like October through March or whatever. So that can be misdiagnosed. And there's where it's helpful to know that the person has been in the woods as a camper, a hiker, maybe a hunter. So a little history can help a doctor make a good decision, maybe put them on an antibiotic or whatever, just to cover bases so that the person might really have, say, the flu, might have Lyme disease as opposed to the flu. They're similar in the first presentation. But as you read through here, you'll find out that they'll overcome what the flu-like signs and symptoms. But then later on, it can attack the heart. It can attack joints. It can attack the nervous system. And it's like a person has Alzheimer's, but they don't have Alzheimer's. They have Lyme disease. So it's good if you like the outdoors. And, you know, South Carolina is a state where people enjoy deer hunting. I enjoy it. Meat's good. But you got to be careful, and you got to check yourself out. You can treat it with a common antibiotic like doxycycline or something like that. There's the picture of the tick up top on page 750. I think in a handout that I gave you, you know, for your lab exam. That's a pretty small tick. You didn't get to see that because we were not in lab, but the Ixodes tick is much smaller than the other tick that we're going to talk about. Look at the bottom of the page, and you see, looks like an arm or a leg or something down there. Maybe it's, not sure what it is, to tell you the truth. But you see the rings, you see the red center and the ring around it. So they talk about a bullseye rash. It's nice if you get that. That's a nice diagnostic picture of the fact that you've got Lyme disease. But only half the people show that. You don't want to let it get that far. Okay, you're all right with Lyme disease? How can you prevent it? Well, you can wear insect repellent. You can put that on your clothes and so forth. That'll help. But check yourself out when you come in from the field. And if you find a tick on you, and make sure you know this, okay? Because you're going to have kids one day. Some of you already do. So most kids go and play in the woods. We were always in the woods as kids. And check your kids out and so forth. Got to go to look at all those spots that nobody ever sees. But if you get one, take a pair of tweezers and gently grab it. Don't try and squish it all up or anything like that, but just pull it straight out, slowly straight out, and then put it in a little jar of alcohol. Now, most of you say, "Oh, I'd burn that rascal," flush it down the commode. Don't do that. Put it in a jar of alcohol. That'll kill it. And you want to put a date on the jar. So if within 10 days or 2 weeks you come down with flu-like signs or symptoms, you take that jar to the doctor and say, "This is what I pulled off of me a week or 10 days, 2 weeks ago. And now I'm feeling like I got the flu. I'm aching, my shoulders hurt, my back, and so forth. I'm fatigued." Oh, the doctor says, "Oh, this is not necessarily the flu. This could be Lyme disease." Because the first presentations are very similar. So that's what you do if you find a tick on you. Just constant pressure, pull it out. One of the things with us is when we were in the military, we would take a little gauze and put a little drop of alcohol, a drop, not soaking wet with alcohol, but a drop. The fumes of the alcohol irritate the tick, and it likes to back out. And of course, when we were on military training in the middle of the woods, well, we're right out there in the middle of the ticks. And so that's what we would do to help those guys that were, because we were a medical unit. And so we would put little pieces of a little gauze pad around it for a little while, take it off, put it back on, take it off, put it back on, irritate the tick will back out. But you can grab them with tweezers and just pull them straight out. Don't twist them or anything like that. Don't do that number. You don't want to leave the head in there. That can leave opportunity for infection. Okay. All right. So that's how you prevent any kind of tick problem. Let's look at a second tick problem on page 751. And you see in the second column, it says rickettsial and related systemic diseases. So you were looking at rickettsias, named for a guy named Ricketts. That's interesting too, because rickets is a condition of the bone when it's soft, osteomalacia, I believe that is. We had a kid in our 5th grade who had that. He easily broke his bones. Come down to the 5th line in that second column, look over to the right, and you see, come down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you see rickettsias, or small gram-negative coccobacilli, kind of look like little footballs. And they are obligate intracellular parasites. They're not viruses. They're little rods, little bacteria, and you can kill them with an antibiotic. You can't kill a virus with an antibiotic now. Remember that. But these guys are very small little fellas, have to live inside a cell. Now, what cell do they live inside? Come down to the next paragraph, which says before 1984. Now come down, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 lines in that paragraph. And you see it says rickettsial diseases have several properties in common. The organisms invade and damage the cells of blood vessel linings. Now, if you remember your anatomy, the cells that line our arteries and veins, we call endothelial cells. Not epithelial, but endothelial. And that's what a capillary consists of. A capillary is that little tube where exchange of gases and wastes and so forth can occur at that level. That capillary is 1 cell thick, and these guys damage these cells, and they leak. The blood vessel leaks. Look at the last sentence. This leakage causes skin lesions and especially, how do you say that word? Petechiae. Petechiae. Go over to the next page, 752. And you see what petechiae are. Pinpoint hemorrhages under the skin. Now, people will call that a rash. It's not damaging the skin. Like if you get a rash from some sort of chemical on your foot, on your arm or your leg or something like that. The skin is not damaged. It's blood under the skin. If you think back, there's something similar in measles. When you get common measles, they call it a rash, but it's blood under the skin. But it's not caused by a rickettsia. Remember, it's caused by a virus that gets inside the endothelial cells, and your T cells search it out and destroy it. But they damage the endothelial cells in the process of doing that. They don't care if it damages it or not. They're going to take that antigen out. Remember how it started up here on the head and worked its way down? Okay. Now, keep that in mind and look on page 753. And there up at the top, you see the Dermacentor. Got a nice big shield on the back there, as you see. Much larger tick than the Ixodes tick. People call them dog ticks, wood ticks, or whatever. And they can carry that disease. They don't have to, but they can. So come down to the bottom of page 753. And you see the heading in the second column, Rocky Mountain Spotted Fever. And you can read about the Appalachian Spotted Fever. Same thing, it's just with the mountains. Now come down to the last two lines of that little short column. It says this disease, Rocky Mountain Spotted Fever, or its name, and they add an I. And you see it's transmitted by the ticks of the genus Dermacentor. Wood ticks, there's a number of different kinds of ticks, but pretty good sized ticks. Now look in the second column. Second column, page 753. After 3 to 4 days incubation, you get fever, headache, and weakness. And then followed in a couple of days or so, you get a rash. Notice the rash's progress, where it first appears and where does it move to? Ankles and wrists. Prominent on. So it starts on the wrist and moves toward the trunk. Starts on the ankles, moves toward the trunk. What's the rash caused by? It's really not a rash of the skin. Remember, it's petechiae, blood under the skin. As you read in this second column, you come down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's about 6 lines. It says spots are caused by blood leaking out of damaged blood vessels under the skin. That's your petechiae. Now, this can happen in organs, and you can die from this. So you don't take an aspirin and go to bed and think you're going to be all right in a couple of days. And it can be treated with an antibiotic. Okay. Any questions about that? Same preventive measures. You wear light colored clothing. You can do things like tuck your pants into your boots and spray yourself with repellent, thick repellent and so forth. Look your body over when you get through. If you got a good thick head of hair, which I don't have to worry about, you might find them up in there in your head, other places on your body. All right, so let's go to 755. A couple of more things and we'll be through with this chapter. $755, just a couple of things about dengue fever. We don't see it too much around here, but they see it down there in Florida. Some of you may end up going to Florida, Key West and so forth. Come on down to where you see dengue fever. You see it says it's also called breakbone fever. A lot of bone pain. And you look over to the right, you get a high fever, headache, loss of appetite, nausea, and so forth. It's usually self-limiting, not much fun to go through. I want you to look over on page 756. Come down 7 lines. And you see the vector, Aedes, A-E-D-E-S, Aedes. You don't have to know the species, Aegypti, or Aegypti, I guess it is, yep. We have this genus of mosquito. We've got a number of different mosquitoes in South Carolina. You know, the little tiny ones that sometimes come into your ear or whatever. Others, you can hear them coming across the yard. But that's the genus of the mosquito that typically transmits this virus to people. If you come down to the 10th line, let's see, come down 10 lines from that 7th line. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah. 10 Lines, it talks about an outbreak in Key West, Florida. I got to watch that on Monsters Inside of Us. So, okay. That's all I want you to know about it. Sometimes it hurts, break bone fever. The last disease in this chapter, 757. First column. And you see infectious mononucleosis. Okay, 2 or 3 things we want to know about it. As some of you may have had mononucleosis. It really fatigues you. Oh, I see that, Eugene. Excuse me. I was so wrapped up in this material, I didn't read your statement there. He didn't have much fun having it, I would imagine. So as you come down that first column, you see the heading, infectious mononucleosis. Come down to the 1, 2, 3, 4th line, and you see Epstein-Barr. The Epstein-Barr virus. It is a herpes virus. Now, what do we know about herpes viruses? Latency, that's right. They stay in your body. You don't ever get rid of them. Just like we have with fever blisters, we mentioned that. So it's going to stay in your body. Now, come past infectious mononucleosis, you see the bold print there. Come down 2 lines and you see it says EBV infects primarily human lymphocytes. If you think about a lymphocyte is a mononuclear white blood cell. Remember how you have segmented nuclei in the eosinophils and the neutrophils and so forth? But in a lymphocyte, you only have that one nucleus. So that's why they call it mononucleosis. So it attacks our own B cells, which would produce antibodies. Come over to the second column and come down past 1, 2, and 3. And you see the paragraph there, the proliferation of EBV infected lymphocytes is limited by cytotoxic T cells. In other words, our cells that get infected are a problem now. And our T cells come in and take them out. Our cytotoxic T cells. Doesn't make a difference if it's our own cell. A lot of times in cancer, we fight our own cells that have gone rogue on us, and our cytotoxic T cells take them out. Sometimes we may have cancer several times during our lifetime, but they beat it. Now notice, it says the proliferation, that's the growth of EBV infected lymphocytes, is limited by cytotoxic T cells and cells that make humoral antibodies and complement. Excuse me. If that defense fails, the person can end up with B cell cancer. Most people don't get that, though. Some of you may have had mononucleosis. If you have, you know, school. That's right, Amanda. You're right. You stayed out of school probably for 6 weeks. Takes so much energy away from you. You wish somebody could eat for you, go to the bathroom for you, take a shower for you, and all that. Really, most people overcome it. Now, we still have chapter 24. Okay, you're gonna take the exam, the lab exam at 9:30, right? If you got a problem today, you can take it on Wednesday at 9:30. How about on Wednesday, instead of having the fourth test, which we have not covered the material really with me talking with you about it, we could cover chapter 24 and we'd be done with that material. We could have a test on Monday. It'd be lecture 4 Monday at 8 o'clock. Everybody okay with that? April seems to be elated that we're going to do that. Okay, so come Wednesday, oh, I should run for office with these kinds of promises, shouldn't I? Diane, can you take it? Can you take it? You said you got to go to work today. You want to take it on Wednesday at 9:30? Yeah, let's just wait until Wednesday. Okay, you can do it then. Okay, good, Nikki. All right. Okay. Okay, so some of you are going to be taking the lab test, lab exam 3 on Monday today. That's fine, and then the rest of you can do it on Wednesday at 9:30. We'll have a lecture at 8 o'clock come Wednesday morning. And we'll finish this up. What that's actually going to do is the following week, which should be exam week, we have gotten permission where we can carry it a little further. And what I'll do, let's see, after we take that test on Monday, let's see, Monday, okay, I think that's going to be somewhere around the 4th or the 3rd or the 4th or something of May. That'll give me that Wednesday, and we can cover a little bit of urinalysis and some UTIs, okay? Amanda, if you want to take the lab exam today at 9:30, you can do so. If you want to wait and do it on Wednesday, you can do it then. Either way. Okay? So we'll cover chapter 24, diseases of the brain and the meninges and so forth. We'll talk about botulism and tetanus and rabies and things like that. Okay. Everybody comfortable with that? Lecture test 4 would be your last exam, and then we'll have a final the following week. We can actually go a little bit into May, and I'll have a final of 100, 125 questions or something like that. Macy, if I remember correctly, most of it is multiple choice. You got some pictures in there. I sent you those pictures, right? Everybody's got those pictures of the ticks and the worms and so forth. The protozoal parasites. Yes, Amanda, you can take it Wednesday. That's fine. Okay. So we'll actually have our final a week later than when it should be, but what we'll do is take a fifth test. We'll take the fourth test, but I'll be able to add a little bit of UTIs to it. Common infection in the hospital, unfortunately. Catheter care is so important. Okay, well, you guys have a nice day, and maintain your social distance and so forth. Wear your masks or whatever is needed. I've got to take my wife this afternoon. Thank you for those of you that were praying. It's a little better. Some strange things happen taking some of the medication. You know, sometimes it does some weird things in your body. But anyway, she's feeling better. Slow progress, but we're getting, it seems like it's turning for the good. Thank you for your prayers. And you guys have a nice day. I'll look forward to grading your tests after a while, those of you that take it today. And see you come Wednesday morning. Okay, I'm going to close out. You too, Eugene. Have a good day working, buddy. Bye-bye.